Hello, hello, and welcome to the October Google Search SEO Office Hours, where we'll be taking a look at some of the questions that you all submitted to us. My name's Lizzie, and I'll be answering some questions today together with some of the other folks on the Search Relations team. We're still experimenting with the audio-only format, and so you may still see some changes in the way that we're doing these sessions. All right, let's get started.
Bruno asks, what is your advice for websites following best practices in international SEO, but where Google still shows the wrong folder? So in general, you can't guarantee that a user will only ever visit the correct language or country version of a page. That's just from the way that the web works, it's impossible to guarantee, even if Google got everything right. So my recommendation is always to make it as easy as possible for users to find their way to the right version. One way to do this is to do some kind of a banner on your pages. When you recognize that the user is from the wrong country or from a wrong language version, and they're going to your pages, show them a banner. This banner can be implemented with JavaScript if you want something that's a little bit outside of your server. It can also be something that you run directly on your server yourself. The advantage of using a banner versus just redirecting the user to the so-called right location is that you can never be 100% sure that the location which you have in mind is actually the one that is correct for the user. And additionally, by redirecting the user automatically, you kind of run into that situation where perhaps one of Google's crawlers tries to access your pages. And if they're always redirected, for example, to the English version of a page, we would never know about the other language versions that you have there. So ideally, avoid automatic redirects and instead show some kind of a banner to users so that they can find their way to the preferred version.
Matthew is asking, for single-page apps, or SPAs, with server-rendered HTML, is there a way to tell Googlebot it doesn't need to run this SPA's JavaScript bundles? Hi, Matthew. The short answer to your question is no. The slightly longer version is, from the server-side rendering, you get the benefit of having a very robust setup, and the content is in the HTML as early as possible, so Googlebot benefits from the server-rendered HTML to begin with. However, avoiding running the JavaScript bundles through Googlebot would increase complexity dramatically, and complexity usually attracts bugs. There's no benefit of avoiding running the SPA bundles in Googlebot, so I would not worry too much about it, to be honest.
Anonymous is asking, I teach people foreign languages and I give them example sentences with translations. What would be the best HTML markup for a sentence or a word in a foreign language? Thanks for your question. From a Google search perspective, there's nothing particular you need to do in the HTML itself, as long as the content is primarily in one language. You can use hreflang as usual to specify the language of that page. And as for the specific words and example sentences that are throughout the page in another language, the W3 HTML guidelines do say that you can tag the language with the span language equals whatever the language code is to flag these things in line. And it's always a best practice to follow HTML standards. It's not always about SEO, and these things can also be used by screen readers to change pronunciation, so it can be helpful to add for other reasons.
Dak Swang from Twitter is asking, is it duplicate content if I post the same article on my e-commerce site and on my blog? Well, yes, of course it's the same content, but maybe that's fine. So taking a step back, when it comes to duplicate content, we try to index one version of a piece of content, and we try to show that in the search results. If you publish the same content on multiple sites, like your e-commerce site and your blog, we will try to pick up one of those and show that. It can happen that we pick up both of these and show them in the search results. If you want to fix that on your side, and you really want to say, well, I would prefer to have my blog indexed instead of my e-commerce site, you can do that. You can use the rel canonical link annotation on these pages to let us know which of these is your preferred version. The rel canonical is not a guaranteed way to set the canonicalization. We pick up lots of different signals to make that work out, but it's a great way to let us know about this information, and ideally, we would try to follow it and index that canonical version. That said, if you do end up just publishing this without anything extra on both of these places, that's also fine. It's not that we have some kind of a duplicate content penalty that would suddenly make your site look less valuable in search just because you have the same content in two locations. Oftentimes, that's just how things work out in reality. You can't always set a rel canonical. Sometimes you have multiple country versions with the same content as well. All of that is essentially fine.
Bilal is asking, is it good to add FAQs in a blog post? Do you think Google won't consider it for ranking purposes? Hi, Bilal. It's totally fine to add FAQs to a blog post. It's not inherently good or bad, that it's just a format. And if you're thinking about your audience and answering what's top of mind for them, then you're on the right track. It's important to remember the format itself is not inherently good or bad. It's more about how you answer those questions and making sure that those FAQs are actually the questions that your readers want to know more about.
Bill asked, Google is displaying the wrong pages to its search visitors. As an example, in the US, Google recently selected the main domain as the canonical instead of domain.com/English-US, for example. How can I fix this? The appropriate approach to handling these kind of international issues with regards to pages where you have the same content on multiple pages, maybe for different countries or for different languages, is to use hreflang. Hreflang is an annotation that you can add to the header of your pages or to a sitemap file or the HTTP header that essentially links different country and language versions of pages together and lets us know which of these pages belong into one set. For this to work well, you also need to keep in mind that things like redirecting home pages also need to be a part of that. Because if you don't include the redirecting home page, then we will see that page as being separate from that set of hreflang pages, and we might show it separately in the search results. The correct approach, if you have an automatically redirecting home page, is to use the default hreflang annotation for that redirecting homepage, and then the individual country and language versions for the appropriate sub-URLs that you have there. My guess is that this might be missing there. The other thing to keep in mind is everything around internationalization is never guaranteed. It's always possible for users to reach the wrong version of a page. And as I mentioned before, make sure that you have this backup banner available as well, where if you can recognize that users are going to the wrong version, you can guide them to the right place, or at least the place that you think is correct for them.
Martin is asking, we have an Angular app that is deployed, but is faulty in the web cache. Is that problematic? Hi, Martin. Nice to meet another Martin here. No, that's not problematic. The web cache is a convenience feature to work with pages which are no longer available. Your Angular app will be fine.
Hiba asks, using a foreign language in search while being in a different country. Why do the search results positions differ? This is a great question. And I think anyone who's worked for websites that are not in their own country runs into this as well. In practice, this comes down to things like geo-targeting, where we try to figure out which country is relevant for which kind of queries, and also localization when it comes to things like different languages. A lot of times, the results do vary from country to country, and they do vary from language to language, and that's expected. For some kinds of queries, it's obvious that the user wants to find something local. So if you're looking for, I don't know, washing machine repair, then you probably want something local. Whereas if you're looking for a washing machine repair manual, then you probably don't care if it's local or not. You just want the manual. So with that in mind, it's expected for things to vary across different countries and languages. If you'd like to try things out in a little bit of a more advanced way, one thing you can do is use the advanced search settings within Google Search, which you can access with one of the menus on the side. There you can specify individual countries or individual languages. And with that, you can often drill down and see, well, what would be relevant in this particular country or in this particular language?
Amit Saha is asking, in a UGC content site, we run a weekly no index tag addition program over pages with no traffic. Does it affect SEO due to continuous increase of no index pages over time? My goal is to get the new contents crawled fast and indexed rather than wasting crawl budget on zero traffic pages. Hi, Amit. So, no index won't really help you here if you're primarily wanting to optimize crawl budget. In order to find the no index tag, Google needs to crawl the page, and that's using crawl budget. The only way to control the crawling of your site is with robots text. Also, having more or fewer no index pages doesn't affect the overall SEO or ranking of the website. If this is more about removing low quality content, then sure, no index can do that. But you can also just remove the low quality page directly.
Does hyphenation matter for keywords when optimizing titles and headings? I've seen differences in search volume on the Google Ads keyword planner. In Portuguese, for example, there are keywords that need a hyphen. Well, Raphael, thank you for your question, but unfortunately, I don't know about the Google Ads keyword planner. So that's not something I'd be able to really help you with. I'm not sure how that search volume there would be compiled and how things like hyphenation play a role there. In practice, when it comes to search, my recommendation is to think about what users would be doing when searching and try to express the right approach on your pages and ideally match what users are doing as well. So some words, for example, in German are just really long words, and that's just a really long word. You can also do the same thing with a hyphen in between, but sometimes that also changes the meaning slightly. So from our point of view, it's not something where you can just randomly add a hyphen or remove a hyphen or separate things out into separate words or not. Sometimes these are seen as different words. And again, I don't know how the keywords planner would handle these kind of differences, or if that's something that maybe is smoothed out overall or depends on the individual languages. I honestly don't know.
Rajiv is asking, I have a finance blog that's ranking well, and I covered some topics related to new startups and human resources. Does this affect anything with the helpful content update? Hi, Rajiv. Sure, you can totally cover multiple topics on a website or a vlog as long as they're relevant to your audience and you've got something valuable to add there. One question to ask yourself is, would your audience find the content useful if they came directly to you? Or are you writing this new topic because you thought you'd get more search traffic because of it? The thing to watch out for with the helpful content update is that you're creating this content for your users first and not primarily for search engines. Hope that helps.
All right. Roland is asking, is it a problem if an editorial page contains too many links to external pages? Is there an upper limit here? Well, taking a step back, yes, there is a theoretical limit to the number of links on a page overall, but it's way above what's practical for a web page. Even if you have a mega menu on your pages, you're unlikely to reach any of those limits. That said, it's useful to be reasonable when it comes to the web. I think overall, your users aren't going to try something like 100 links before they can find what they're looking for. So ideally, you should make it as easy as possible for them to recognize important parts of your pages and the important links there. So I would really try to limit it to something that's reasonable.
Another person asked us if the cached version of a page does play a role for search and top stories. The answer is no. The web cache really is just a convenience feature. If you don't see something in the cache, that is not a problem. Please use the testing tools such as the URL inspection tool or the mobile-friendly test to see if the content is in the rendered HTML. If it is in the rendered HTML, you'll be fine.
Search Console still shows tons of same-site, non-secure pages as referrals to old HTTPS pages. How do I flush them out? Bringing some context in here, this is specific to the URL inspection tool in Search Console, where we show the referring page in the indexing section. For this, you don't have to do anything. It's perfectly fine to keep those pages there. The referring URL is the place where we first found a link to that particular page. If this page has been indexed for quite some time now, then that initial link might be quite old as well, and it might be an HTTP page. From our point of view, that's perfectly fine. This is more about giving you information about where did Google ever pick up this page? And it's not something that we would take into account when it comes to search ranking, for example.
All right, we have Sudeep asking, is 150 words enough for a news article? Well, there's no minimum or maximum word count for a given article. Word count alone is not a ranking signal. Instead, we recommend that you focus on creating high-quality content that's relevant to your audience. In the case of a news article, does it cover all of the relevant details, facts, and information about the story? There's no magic number for how many words it takes to answer that question.
All right. Roland asks, if all editorial pages of a website start with the same introductory text, for example, a text block that encourages newsletter registration, can this have a negative effect on the SEO visibility of the individual article pages? All right, yes, you can reuse text blocks across a wide part of your website, and that's fairly common. For example, most websites have a shared header and a shared footer across a large number of pages, and that's perfectly fine. In practice, what happens is that one of these pages may show up in the search results if someone searches for something specifically related to that shared piece of text, which I suspect would be rare for something like a newsletter registration, unless people are searching for your company newsletter registration, in which case it would make sense to show these pages. But in most cases, you probably wouldn't be seeing that. It doesn't negatively affect the search results for the other parts of the page. That said, a page should have sufficient unique and compelling content of its own, so it should be more than just, well, a header, menu, the newsletter pop-up, and one or two sentence piece of context followed by a shared footer. It should really be something where there's sufficient unique content on the page as well.
Sam Gooch is asking, a site uses machine translations to offer posts in other languages. The content is reviewed by human translators, and they're often happy with the quality after minor tweaks. Is this okay for Google? Hi, Sam. Well, that's good to hear that the human translators are happy, and this is totally fine for Google as long as there's a human involved in the review process. That's the key. The thing you want to watch out for is making sure that the quality continues to be good and working well for the humans that are reading the content.
All right, so I have hundreds of URLs that are indexed but blocked by robots because of SID parameters in my URL. If I do a site query for a domain with in URL SID, I see a lot of omitted results. Does Google know that these are duplicates? Is there anything I have to do? Well, it's kind of a complicated question, but in practice, I wouldn't worry about this. If these URLs are blocked by robots text, then we don't know what's on these pages. We might still index those pages because we see a reference to those URLs somewhere. But in practice, that's not something that would show up in the search results. And like you notice, you really have to dig for those by doing a specific site query plus an in-URL parameter. And then you have to expand the omitted results. So it's really not something that users would see. And with that, it's really not something that would affect your website in a positive or negative way. The one time I would watch out for roboted URLs is when they're ranking instead of your actual content, because that to me is a sign that, well, probably your actual content is not relevant or is not clear enough for users. So that's something where I would look into what is happening with roboted URLs. But if these roboted URLs are just showing up in a site query, that's perfectly fine.
Lalindra asks, does it make sense to add organization and review schema to every page? Well, you don't need to add organization schema to every page. You only need to add it one time. And which page you pick is completely up to you, although the homepage or an about this organization type page may make most sense depending on how your site is set up. And as for review rating, you want to add this markup to pages with reviews about a particular item. If the page doesn't have reviews on it, don't add the markup. You want the markup to match the content that's on that page. It's also important to note that for local businesses or organizations, any review that's self-serving, meaning the entity hosting the review is also in control of the review that's about itself, isn't eligible for those review stars. Make sure to check the documentation for details on specific features. It covers edge cases like this, requirements, that kind of thing. And also keep in mind that schema is used for other things. It's not just for SEO. But if you're curious about what does Google search need in order to show your content in a particular feature, check out the search gallery for more information about that.
All right, Roman asked, what are the implications of merging and redirecting a website B to website A if website B is actually 100 times bigger than website A? I'm concerned about diluting the overall topicality of the website. The two websites are in topically close niches, but not really having the same intent. All right, so I think this kind of topic is really complicated because there is no really clear answer with regards to what happens when you merge or split a website. In practice, if you do a site migration from one website to another one, and you're just changing the domain name, then that's something that is very easy to process and fairly straightforward. And that's something where you have clear expectations on the old state and what should happen with the new state. But if you're merging two websites, what would the situation be afterwards? These are two independent websites. And for these kind of things, there is no absolute answer. So that's something where I would watch out for setting expectations. If you're doing this with clients, if you're doing this for your own websites, then keep in mind that essentially you're creating something new. You're not just moving one website to another. And by creating something new, essentially Google systems have to look at the new overall website before they can really understand what is happening and what is the context of this new website within the scope of the entire web. So that's something where I would be cautious. In practice, sometimes you just have to do these kind of things. We've had to migrate a part of our documentation from various blogs to our main developer site, which is also a part of a bigger developer site. And these kind of migrations happen. It's just you have to keep in mind that it's sometimes a bit tricky. And when things get tricky, one thing I recommend is really trying to follow our recommendations as much as possible, ideally tracking down all of those details. And secondly, keeping a log of everything that you're doing so that afterwards, should something weird happen, you can trace back and see where that change is coming from. So if you're merging two websites, keep a track of the individual URLs that you're merging, the old source and the new destination, so that afterwards, when you look at your new website, you can follow back and see, oh, well, this specific page actually comes from that website there. The closer you can keep track of this kind of migration and follow along, the more likely you can catch any issues before they cause something bigger to go wrong.
Suave Shore asks us, hey, John, we want to use more modern image formats like WebP, but believe that if we use WebP images on our site, users with Apple devices or some older browsers will not be able to see our images. This is especially concerning regarding images that we intend to link to on social media. Is there a straightforward way to use WebP and address this kind of concern? Hi there, I'm not John, but I would still try my best to answer your question here. There's different strategies to do this. One would be to use some sort of image proxy. The other one is to basically use source set or the picture element to provide fallbacks for different users and devices and browsers. Then the browsers will figure out which format to show that has the upside of being absolutely backwards compatible and relatively easy to do. There are a bunch of services and software that allows you to convert an image into all the different formats. All right, that's it from my side for this round.
All right, and that about wraps it up for this month's rendition of Google Search SEO Office Hours. We hope that you're finding it useful or at least interesting while we're in experimental mode with the format and the name and how we're publishing these. Let us know what you think. You can leave us a comment on the YouTube video or on Twitter at Google Search C. Until next time, bye for now.